Hey there, and welcome back to Parental Blueprint. Today's conversation is one every parent of a young child needs to hear. We are diving deep into what the science of early childhood development says you absolutely must do before your child turns 7.
Because what happens in those first 7 years shapes everything that comes after. This conversation is going to challenge you, encourage you, and completely change how you see your role as a parent in these early years. Stay with us.
Why? Because their morning toast was cut into squares instead of triangles.
Oh, the horror of the square toast.
It's madness. But in that moment of pure chaos, you're staring at this tiny human, sobbing over geometry, and the inevitable questions hit you. Like, am I doing this right?
Am I completely messing this up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Am I setting them up for success? Well, it turns out how you handle that square toast is literally wiring the adult they will become.
It really is.
So today we are taking a deep dive into the biological and behavioral blueprints of early childhood. We were pulling insights from Harvard Center on the Developing Child, the CDC, and this really fascinating Japanese behavioral framework.
Yeah, that framework is incredible.
It really is. And our mission today is to decode exactly what shapes a child's lifelong emotional and academic success before they even turn 7.
Because honestly, the stakes here are entirely different than most people realize. Those first 7 years, they aren't just a warm-up for real life.
Right.
They are the actual architectural blueprint. We aren't just talking about figuring out how to manage a temper tantrum today so you can survive a grocery trip.
Which is usually all I'm trying to do, to be honest.
Right, just surviving the aisle. But we are literally engineering the adult they will eventually become.
That is heavy. So to understand how to shape that adult, we have to start by looking at what is physically happening inside a child's head. Right.
You do.
Because the data from Harvard shows that this is exactly where our natural adult instincts just completely misfire.
Yeah, they do. Because the sheer biological scale of early brain development is, well, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
Okay, give us the numbers.
So in the first 5 years of life, a child's brain builds 1 million neural connections per second.
Wait. 1 million per second.
Per second, yeah.
That is literally a biological construction zone running at warp speed.
Exactly. But the really critical piece here is the order of that construction. They don't just build the whole house at once.
Like they don't pour the foundation and put on the roof on the same day.
Right. So the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm system, the part that's responsible for intense emotions, fear, survival instincts, that comes online very early.
Okay, that makes sense for survival.
Right. But the prefrontal cortex, which is the reasoning center, the part responsible for logic, self-control, emotional regulation, that develops incredibly slowly.
Oh, wow.
In fact, it doesn't fully mature until around age 25.
Age 25, which completely explains why the #1 mistake parents make is expecting emotional maturity from a brain that physically isn't built yet.
Exactly. We treat little kids like they're just miniature adults.
Right. We rush them to behave maturely. We use phrases like, you're stressing me out, or, you should know better.
Which is so unfair to them.
But wait, I have to push back on this idea for a second. Aren't we supposed to teach them to be mature?
Well, yes, but...
Because if we don't demand some level of self-control when they throw a fit over the square toast, aren't we basically surrendering to wild animals?
I get that fear, I really do.
Because expecting a toddler to logically control their emotions, it feels a bit like expecting a brand new smartphone to run a massive complex application when it hasn't even downloaded the operating system yet.
That is the perfect analogy. You literally can't run the app without the operating system, and there is a massive functional difference between demanding maturity and actually building it.
Okay, break that down for me.
So when a parent expects a young child to be their emotional caretaker, like when you say, you're making me sad today, you need to calm down.
Right. We hear that all the time.
It causes a psychological dynamic called parentification.
Parentification. So that's essentially role reversal, right?
It is. Suddenly, the 2-year-old's brain thinks it is responsible for the adult's emotional stability.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a lot of pressure.
It's huge. That triggers chronic anxiety because the child intuitively knows they aren't equipped for that job. They don't have the tools.
So the child learns that their emotions are a burden to the adult.
Yes. And that they must perform compliance just to earn love. They aren't actually learning self-control at all. They're just learning fear.
That is heartbreaking.
It really is. Dr. Karen Purvis puts this brilliantly. She says, children don't remember what we teach them, they remember who we are to them.
Wow. Children remember who we are to them. That completely flips the script.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it means they aren't just listening to the lecture, they're absorbing the emotional state of the lecturer. So if we can't just demand adult behavior, how do we actually install that missing operating system for emotional regulation?
Well, the mechanism for building those neural pathways relies on what Harvard researchers call serve and return interactions.
Serve and return.
Right, combined with a process called co-regulation. Because the child's prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped, as we said, they literally cannot regulate themselves.
So they need our hardware.
Exactly. Co-regulation essentially means lending the child your mature nervous system until theirs finishes developing.
Okay, so the strategy specifically highlighted in the sources here is called name it to tame it,
Yes, it's a great tool.
which means instead of silencing a crying child with dismissive, stop crying, you're fine.
Which never works anyway.
Never. Adults should help label the emotion using nuanced terms. So moving beyond just mad or sad to things like, I see you're frustrated, or, you seem disappointed.
And the cool thing is, naming the feeling isn't just a communication trick, it is a biological intervention.
Wait, really? How does that work?
So when a child is screaming, their amygdala is firing rapidly, it's glowing red hot, basically. But when you help them put a specific name to the emotion, it literally diverts electrical activity and blood flow away from the amygdala.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it routes it up to the prefrontal cortex, the reasoning center. You are physically forcing the logic brain to wake up and process the emotional storm.
That is fascinating. Think about the wrong cup meltdown. A child completely loses it because you gave them the blue cup instead of the red cup.
A classic scenario.
Right. But the cup isn't the actual problem. The cup is just the tipping point for a nervous system that is completely overwhelmed.
Exactly.
It makes me think of this serve and return concept like a tennis match. As the adult, your job isn't to violently smash the ball back across the net to win the point and shut down the argument.
No, not at all.
Your job is to gently keep the rally going so the child actually learns how to swing the racket.
I love that. And keeping that rally going requires a baseline habit, which is connection before correction.
Connection before correction.
Yes. You have to lead with physical and emotional presence, not just verbal authority. When a child's distress is met with empathy instead of volume, like when you get down on their eye level and use a calm voice.
Their brain actually changes.
Yes, their brain physically wires itself to believe, I am safe. Connection creates the foundation for discipline, whereas shame completely bypasses the logic center and just triggers more fight or flight anxiety.
Okay, so it's relatively easy to practice serve and return when a kid is just sad about the color of their cup. But empathy alone doesn't clean permanent marker off the living room wall.
No, it definitely doesn't.
So how does a parent bridge the gap between being a safe emotional harbor and actually enforcing a hard rule?
This is where we look at a brilliant framework from Japan called Shitsuke.
Shitsuke.
Right. It translates roughly to discipline, but it operates on a totally different mechanism than our Western definition.
Because in the West, discipline is almost synonymous with punishing a bad behavior after the fact.
Right, exactly. We wait for the mistake, then we punish.
Right.
But Shitsuke is fundamentally about instruction and practice. It's not about putting out fires. It's fire prevention.
Okay, so looking at the sources, there are 3 core principles to Shitsuke, and the first one is model a behavior. So let's go back to the kid drawing on the wall with a marker. The immediate biological instinct as a parent is to yell, "What did you just do?"
Oh, of course. It's so hard not to.
But under this framework, you have to demonstrate the exact calm response you want them to adopt. You literally narrate your regulation out loud. Like you say, I am really frustrated right now. I am going to take 3 deep breaths.
And then you actually have to take them.
Right. You can't just say it. You have to do it.
And look, the reality is you are going to lose your temper sometimes. You're human.
Definitely.
But the framework accounts for that. If you yell, you use the aftermath as a deliberate teaching moment. You apologize.
You actually say sorry to the kid.
Yes, you say, I shouldn't have yelled. Next time I will try to take deep breaths. By doing that, you are actively modeling the mechanics of how to repair a relationship when you make a mistake.
Which is a crucial adult skill.
A massively crucial skill.
Okay, the second principle of Shitsuke is setting clear expectations and consistent boundaries. The sources give an example of a family with a rigid shoes off at the door rule.
That's a great example.
Yeah, because the adults consistently follow and enforce it every single time, without exception, their 2.5-year-old not only complies effortlessly, but actually greets guests at the door and forces them to take their shoes off too.
I love that. Consistency completely eliminates the guesswork for the child's brain. But this is exactly where modern Western parenting often really struggles.
Oh, so?
Well, we have been culturally conditioned to view strict, non-negotiable rules as a negative thing, like we are being too authoritarian.
Right, we act like strict rules are crushing a child's spirit or limiting their freedom to explore.
Exactly.
But aren't clear boundaries actually like guardrails on a dangerous mountain road? Like, it can drive much more freely and with significantly less anxiety when you know exactly where the edge of the cliff is.
The psychology absolutely backs up that analogy. Rules reduce anxiety because they create a predictable environment.
Predictability is safe.
Right. Imagine an adult employee whose boss never told them what time to arrive, never provided a job description, and just randomly changed their mood every afternoon.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It would be. That employee would spend all day stressed, anxious, and constantly testing the waters just to figure out what the invisible expectations are.
Oh, I see.
A toddler without boundaries is living in that exact state of chronic workplace anxiety.
Wow, that is a powerful way to look at it. Which brings us to the third and perhaps most perspective-shifting principle of Shitsuge. When a child misbehaves, instead of asking, how do I punish this behavior, you ask, what skill is missing?
Yes, what skill is missing? When you look at behavior as a skill deficit rather than a character flaw, the entire dynamic changes.
So when a child snatches a toy from a friend, they aren't being malicious or selfish.
No, they literally lack the cognitive skill of turn-taking.
And when they throw a massive tantrum in the grocery store over a candy bar, it's not calculated defiance to embarrass you.
Not at all. It's a complete inability to handle disappointment. The skill of processing disappointment just isn't there yet.
You know, if you think about it, we see this in adults all the time. Think of an adult boss who throws a screaming tantrum in a meeting because a project is delayed.
We've all seen that, boss.
Right. That adult isn't just being a jerk. They literally never learned the emotional regulation skill required to process frustration.
Precisely. So your job as the parent is to identify and teach the missing skill, not just punish the symptom. You are teaching the curriculum for adulthood.
Okay, so we have the emotional safety built through serve and return, and we have our behavioral guardrails in place with Shitsuge.
Yep, the foundation is there.
But raising an adult isn't just about managing their behavior so they don't draw on walls, right? It's about pushing them to thrive intellectually and independently.
Absolutely. Dennis Waitley has a quote that captures this perfectly. He said, "Don't prepare the path for the child, prepare the child for the path."
Because confidence comes entirely from competence.
Precisely. Now, parents have a deep biological urge to rescue their kids from every struggle. We want to prevent them from feeling distress.
Of course, it hurts to see them struggle.
It does. But if we rescue them from manageable, age-appropriate challenges, like figuring out how to zip their own jacket or resolving a minor disagreement with a sibling on their own, we rob them of the opportunity to build resilience.
We are essentially preparing the path, making it perfectly smooth, rather than giving them the shock absorbers they need for a bumpy road.
Exactly. You have to let them struggle a little to build those shock absorbers.
Okay, building on that concept of competence, the sources dig into cognitive development, specifically the massive, disproportionate impact of early reading. And the current statistics in the sources are genuinely alarming.
They are heartbreaking, honestly.
The data shows that right now, 67% of fourth graders cannot read at a proficient level. Over a third cannot even achieve the lowest basic level of reading comprehension.
It is a full-blown educational crisis. A child's vocabulary at age 3 is actually one of the strongest predictors of their first-grade reading success.
At age 3.
Yes. And reading ability in first grade powerfully predicts academic and socioeconomic outcomes all the way through high school.
Wow. But we need to be really specific about the methodology the sources highlight here, because it's not what a lot of people assume.
Right, it's not about apps or screens.
Yeah, it is not about plopping a 2-year-old in front of an educational tablet program. And it's certainly not about getting them to memorize the shapes of whole words, which is how a lot of schools actually teach it. The proven method relies on parent-led decoding and phonemic awareness.
So to break that down, decoding means teaching a child that letters are actually a code for sounds.
Right.
You don't teach them to recognize the word CTET as a single picture. You teach the isolated sounds, ik, and how to blend them together.
Because the sources explain that when you teach a child to memorize whole words like pictures, their brain eventually reaches a capacity limit around third grade when the words get too complex, which is why we see that huge drop-off in proficiency.
Exactly. The brain just can't memorize that many word shapes.
But doing this decoding work for just 10 to 15 minutes a day has a compounding effect. It literally, physically alters the brain, makes a child measurably smarter, and can even compensate for modest cognitive ability in other areas.
It's the highest leverage activity a parent can do.
But I have a fundamental question about this, looking at all the sources together. We just talked about not treating kids like miniature adults.
We did.
We talked about letting their brains develop at their own pace. So isn't drilling academic reading skills for 15 minutes a day at age 2 or 3 placing unfair adult-level pressure on them?
Well, if you are approaching it like a high-stakes exam, yes, absolutely. But early reading instruction, when done correctly, is just a brief, joyful connection.
Joyful Kent.
Yeah, we are talking about 10 minutes of sitting together on the floor, laughing, making silly sounds, and engaging with letters. When it's driven by parent-led play, it is not an academic burden. It is an empowerment tool.
Okay, but how does breaking down phonetics actually empower a toddler?
Think about the famous toddler why phase. Why is the moon in the sky? Why do bugs have 6 legs? Where does the water go?
Oh, the endless whys.
Yes. Children are naturally intensely curious about the physical world. Giving them the foundational skills of decoding feeds that exact curiosity.
I see.
You are handing them the ultimate key to independent problem solving. It's not about forcing them to perform for a preschool application.
Right, it's not about showing off.
Exactly. It's about giving them independent access to the answers they are already desperately looking for.
That makes a lot of sense. So, with all these complex psychological strategies, behavioral frameworks, and academic tools in play, how does a parent or caregiver actually know if the blueprint is coming together correctly?
That's the tricky part, isn't it?
It is. Because you are living with this child every day, so the slow changes can be invisible. How do you know you aren't missing a critical structural flaw?
That is where the CDC's developmental milestones framework becomes a non-negotiable tool.
Okay, the CDC milestones.
Yeah, it is a comprehensive, clinically backed system that tracks exactly how children play, learn, speak, act, and move, starting from 2 months of age all the way up to 5 years old.
And the pediatric guidelines and the sources on this are highly specific. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends standardized screening at 9, 18, and 30 months.
Yes, and they also recommend targeted autism screening specifically at 18 and 24 months.
Right. And the overarching philosophy of the CDC program is learn the signs, act early.
They emphasize this because the wait-and-see approach is biologically flawed.
Wait and see is flawed.
Completely. If a child loses a skill they once had, or consistently misses milestones, for example, if at 18 months they aren't pointing at objects to show them to you, or they aren't making consistent eye contact, parents are urged to ask for specialist referrals immediately.
Like a speech-language pathologist or an occupational therapist.
Exactly.
But I can imagine that for a lot of parents, looking at a milestone tracker is a highly stressful experience. It can feel like a running permanent report card on your parenting.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at the app and think, oh no, my kid isn't stacking 3 blocks yet. I'm failing at this.
That anxiety is universal. But we have to fundamentally reframe the purpose of those milestones. It is not a grade on your parenting. It is a strictly mechanical, early warning diagnostic system.
Okay, a diagnostic system.
Right. If we tie this all the way back to the Harvard data we started with, those 1 million neural connections forming every single second early intervention is purely about leveraging the brain's highest period of plasticity.
Meaning the brain is most moldable right at that moment.
Exactly. Catching a developmental delay at 18 months is radically different than catching it at 7 years old.
Because the concrete is still wet, so to speak.
Yes. If a foundational skill is missing, acting early means you are introducing therapy while the brain is still uniquely designed to effortlessly rewire and adapt itself. You are working with the biological current instead of swimming against it years later.
So it's not a punishment. It's a rapidly closing window of opportunity.
That's exactly what it is.
Let's take a breath and recap the sheer amount of ground we've covered today in this deep dive.
We've covered a lot.
We really have.
Yeah.
We started by looking at the literal biological construction of the brain, understanding those 1 million connections firing every second, and why the logic center is the very last thing to arrive.
Right, the operating system.
Exactly. Then we explored how to build emotional safety, keeping that tennis rally going through co-regulation and physically shifting brain activity by naming emotions to tame them.
Moving from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex.
Yes, and we completely redefine discipline using Shitsuge, moving away from reactive punishment and toward actively modeling and teaching the specific skills a child lacks.
Fire prevention, not putting out fires.
Right. And finally, we talked about empowering kids through manageable struggles and the incredible compounding leverage of 15 minutes of early phonemic literacy.
And to you, listening to this right now, the ultimate takeaway from sifting through all this developmental science is really a shift in perspective.
It's a huge shift.
The goal isn't just to raise a child who behaves perfectly so they look impressive to your neighbors.
Right, it's not about the optics.
No. The goal is to raise a child who feels well, so they behave from a place of emotional wholeness rather than a place of anxious fear. The reality is, the world doesn't really need more perfectly well-behaved children.
What does it need?
What the world desperately needs is more emotionally healthy adults.
That is so true. And I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on as you go about your day.
I love this part.
If the first 7 years permanently hardwire our emotional baseline, our resilience, and our ability to handle disappointment, wait, let me rephrase that. If those first 7 years hardwire how we handle disappointment, think about the most difficult, stubborn, or reactive adults you interact with right now.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it's an unpredictable boss in your workplace, or a highly defensive family member, or even a politician screaming on the news. Are the intense, intractable conflicts we face as adults actually just the unlearned skills of millions of 7-year-olds walking around in adult bodies?
That is quite the visual.
It really is. It
Yeah.
definitely makes you look at a toddler crying over square toast a whole lot differently. Thanks for diving deep with us.